So, you're preparing for retirement. Well, let me ask you this. Do you feel like you're ready? Or does the idea of retirement spark concerns about running out of money, struggling with the transition, or does it fill you with dread trying to understand the intricacies of accessing your superannuation? Well, in this video, I'm going to talk about 5 key rules you should know when transitioning to retirement. And it's these 5 rules I see my clients following all the time to help them get the most out of their golden years. Also, be sure to stick around to the end, as the last rule is always the one people forget about. And time again, it's the one that I see making the biggest difference in outcomes of retirees. Now, the first rule is to get informed. How do we know where to start if we don't even know what we need? One thing we recommend all of our clients do, and every person we work with, is to start doing a budget. And not a hopeful budget about what you expect to spend at different points in the future, but look at what you're spending today. Think about those expenses that aren't going to exist going forward, school fees, mortgages, and also think about those things that will be more consistent going forward, like travel. A good place to start is ASFA's Comfortable Retirement Index, or an estimate of what level of income you need in a comfortable retirement. And while that won't be for everyone, it is, of course, a very clear and basic average. It gives you a starting point to consider and compare your own potential expenses from. Extending on this is one of the biggest questions we have, and something we probably hide away from, is understanding our life expectancy. There's a lot of tools available that give you a better understanding of how long you might live. And when looking at this is probably the most important input in how you're going to plan for your retirement. For those, historically, life expectancy was in the 80s to 90s, but there's data coming out these days showing that more and more people, once they get to 50, are more likely to live to 95, and that can change the entire perspective of how you need to act and plan and budget in retirement. The second one is, if you transition your retirement, or if you're thinking about transitioning your retirement, is do you need to work anymore? And there's actually 2 parts of this question. So the first one is financially. So by getting informed, understanding what you need, you might be able to make a decision that you no longer need to work because you're in a financial position that doesn't require it. Once you have that decision, and again, on this, it's important to go seek advice, whether that's financial advice, whether that's books, websites, podcasts, YouTube videos. There are so many resources that can help you get an idea and help you provide some level of base, but you're going to have to do the work yourself. And when it comes to, do you need to work anymore? Once you're informed and you know how much capital you have, how long that can last, or what access to the pension or other benefits might be, you've got a position to make a financial decision. The second one's emotionally. So much of what we do and so much of our life and social activity comes from work. So is it going to be the right thing for you to stop work completely and go into complete retirement? Or are there other options? Could you transition out of work slowly? Could you take a sabbatical? What are the ultimate and the various options you have available? Now, the third one is assess all your income sources. If you're looking to transition to retirement and you're doing it and you want to do it earlier than the preservation age of 65 and also 60, then the big question is, can you access your super yet? For those that have been saving and had the benefit of the super guarantee for multiple decades now, your superannuation balances are going to be a central part of that income you can produce in retirement. So can you access it yet? And if you haven't reached 60, in the majority of cases, you're not going to be able to. So in that case, do you have any assets outside of superannuation you might be able to use to draw an income? Do you have property? And a big question at the moment is, with rental yields on property quite low, as a very broad comment, is do you have property? And if you're going to rely on this for an income in retirement, is it going to be enough to, after offsetting the maintenance cost or agents' fees and the other costs, is that going to provide enough income for you? Or are the alternatives of shares, term deposits, which can all offer significantly higher income and potential for growth as well, are they more attractive? And then again, what other income sources do you have? Do you have a company that you're still operating? Do you have access to long service leave? Are there ways you can delay the use of your accumulated superannuation or investment assets through the benefit of long-term employment? And thirdly would be to consider going back. Were you open to consulting work or going back to work or part-time or casual work in some way, which can offer both a financial and an emotional or a psychological benefit? The fourth rule is this big question of whether you should be changing your superannuation assets and how they're invested. So should you be taking more risk or less risk? In the majority of cases, there's no significant reason for you to be changing your superannuation assets or the mix that you have. A lot of questions we get is, shouldn't I just be focusing on income? There's a lot of rules out there on the internet that say you should put a certain, like your age in fixed income or your age minus 100. And again, incredibly important, this is general advice and there's no rule that suits every single person. So what assets are best suited to investing in retirement? And in our view, it needs to include both income and growth. And how we live today and the nature of where markets are today is that you can get significantly more attractive income at the very base level and and prospective growth than you could as little as 3 to 5 years ago, where interest rates were next to zero. And one of the big questions and one of the important ones to ask is, if you've been investing incredibly aggressively while you were younger, how does that change once you hit retirement? And this can be a big part of financial advice. A big part of this is understanding, once you understand how much you need to spend or you want to spend versus how much capital you have and what income that can produce, it makes it very easy to understand the trade-off. And the trade-off could be the need to take more risk, the need to spend less, the need to work a little bit more. But without all that information and doing the work yourself, you're never going to get to that point. The final one is all about maximizing superannuation. So we've gone through in multiple videos that once you retire and you start drawing a pension from your superannuation assets, you essentially become tax-free. So your before tax income becomes after tax income, and it is an incredibly tax-effective source for retirement. But it can be incredibly difficult, and it's not always in the best interest to be contributing heavily to superannuation, say in your 40s and 50s, for example, because you might have other expenses. You likely still have a mortgage, you might have school fees, you might have travel or business plans, and you're putting all the money into that. So in many cases, we see a lot of people that have built investments outside of superannuation that they can then rely on in retirement. But a big important point to note here is that you can now contribute until you're 75. So there is no rush to get all your assets into superannuation and doing so early. And there's also a few ways that you can manage the tax implications by planning ahead and having a financial plan in place. So in a lot of cases, it can be better off ceasing or waiting till you've reduced employment and your salary starts to reduce before you look at selling down some of those personal investments and contributing them into superannuation. This allows you to manage that capital gains tax risk over time. And similarly, it can reduce the tax rate you're on and therefore increase the amount of capital you have after tax. There's also, as we covered in another video, the prospect of being able to make a concessional contribution. So your concessional contributions include super guarantee and salary sacrifice, but you can actually make these from after tax money and claim a dollar for dollar tax deduction in your tax return. And this is a limit that's currently at $30,000. So if you've stopped working and your super guarantee isn't taking up your concessional contributions cap, you could make up to $30,000 in contribution before you turn 67 and claim a tax deduction that can offset any capital gains that might be paid or redundancy or other payouts that come. So I think reiterating those, the first is get informed, do a budget, and take this task on yourself. The second is consider the question, do you need to work anymore? But considering it from those two perspectives. Third is understand and address what your income sources are going to be and put this on a page. 4 is to consider and look at and think about the mix of the assets that you have and whether they're suitable for generating an income, but also growing, because we know people are living longer and longer. And finally, maximizing superannuation, but doing it in the most tax effective way. So I encourage you, please reach out if you have any questions, comment, follow our page for more information, and we'll continue to produce hopefully incredibly useful content in the coming months.